everyone, and welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we are going to make an adorable bag that can be folded up into an itty bitty bag, or it can be unfolded into a huge bag. And it's actually a really simple and quick bag to put together. Today, we're gonna make the champion bag, and this comes to us from Land of the Loft Patterns. Now, I do believe this might be their first pattern. I'm not for sure. I think, though, this is their first pattern, and oh my goodness, this is such a fun bag. So now this bag is meant to be used with a material that can have its backside used as the lining, because we don't have a lining in this bag, okay? So let's go over all the details. First, we have these two great handles on top. There's two different sizes of handles. You could do a longer one or a shorter one. I think this is the longer one. Next, you have your main front panel, you have your main back panel, and you have a nice firm base. You have these adorable little zipper ends over here. I think today I'm gonna try metal zipper ends instead of the vinyl ones, just to see how that works. We have this cute little flap right here. I will be honest, on this flap specifically, I use Decovil Heavy, which is a very kind of strong stabilizer, and I would not recommend it. I would recommend either just like a thicker vinyl and no stabilizer, or Decovil Light for the flap, just because you need it to be able to fold, and that Decovil Heavy does not want to fold on me. I'm using a plastic cam snap on this one. We have a nice long zipper, open it up. And so you can see on the inside, we do have lining pockets. This is a slip pocket that is also a zipper pocket, but the back side of your exterior is your lining. So for example, you're gonna wanna use like a nylon material, maybe even a water resistant canvas, something like that. I wouldn't use quilt cotton, and I wouldn't use vinyl either for the main panels, just because I don't personally love the backside of vinyl. So that's one pocket option, and then on the other side we have another pocket option. There's a slip pocket. There's lots of different options here, and I will say all pockets are completely optional. You don't need to have any of the pockets if you don't want them. On the bottom, we have a nice, firm, removable base, which I love so much, because this way, if you don't need this, you can just take this, stuff it with all your stuff, your towels, your bathing suits, stuff it with your overnight, stuffies and a little blankie and some clothes and things like that. And if you have kids, you can take their stuff too. But if you want to use this for something and you need a bit of a firmer base, think like going to a farmer's market or something like that, then you can add that firmer base. Now, one of the coolest things about this bag, besides it just being absolutely adorable, is that it folds up. So I'm going to see if I can show this to you like this, but I will show you top down as well. So you're going to bring the base of the bag up. If I can do this standing up, then you know this is not that challenging. And you're going to fold in one side, and then you're going to fold in the other side. And then you're going to take your removable base, and you're going to just fold that into threes, and then you're going to wrap the bottom of the bag up, and then around that base. Oh my gosh, I did it, look at that. And then you have another little snap over here, and we're gonna just snap the flap in place. And then look at that, you got your little flap down, you've got your little handles here, and it's all easy to put in your purse, put in your car, put wherever you need. It doesn't take up a lot of room, but it can hold a lot of stuff when you unfold it, which I think is really cool. So like I said, I did use a Decovil Heavy on this flap, and I used a plastic cam snaps. Plastic snaps are going to be a little more lightweight than metal snaps. Metal snaps can hold a lot more than the plastic snaps can. And then also that Decovil Heavy on the flap is just don't do that. That was just my mistake. The pattern doesn't tell you to do that. I just did it on accident. But if you do that, you might find that it's hard for it to stay snapped. So think about that whenever you're getting your materials out. But look how stinking cute that is. So thank you so much to Land of the Loft Patterns for allowing me to feature this on the channel today. I'm so excited to show you this bag. I know a lot of you have already made it. If you have already made it, I want to see your version. If you make it for the first time using the video, make sure you tag me. You can use the hashtag OklaRootsTuts, or you can just tag me. I'm OklaRoots on all the social media. I would love to see your version. It is an addicting bag to make. It is one of those bags where you kind of walk through it the first time and you're like, okay. And then you get done, you're like, I gotta make so many more. Everybody needs one of these. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shout outs, anything at all, leave them down in the comment section. I don't know if there's any other patterns out there by Land of the Loft, but I'm hoping we'll get more, because this bag is so stinking cute, and it's just such an original idea. I really, really love all of the materials that all the small businesses are coming out with to make it so much easier for us as bag makers to create cool things. But then when the pattern designers step in and they're like, what could we do with this material that's a little out of the box? I love that. So cannot wait to see what else they come up with. All right, guys, let's get started. All right, so for the material for this bag, you're gonna need at least a yard of exterior material. So this is just, pretty much just a yard of material. Some of this is gonna be used for the pockets inside the bag. Some of it's gonna be used for the main exterior of the bag. So think about that now. For example, I'm using bonded nylon for both of this. The material does need to have a usable back. So no quill cotton. I wouldn't even suggest vinyl. It has like a fuzzy back or anything like that. A bonded nylon, any sort of nylon material that has just kind of like a basic cloth back would be great. Nothing that frays or anything like that. Water resistant canvas I think would also work great for this. The thing is this bag does not have a lining. So the back of your main fabric is the lining. So just think about that ahead of time when you're picking out your materials. So again, like I said, I'm using a bonded nylon. I'm gonna use this fun print for the main part of the bag. And then for the pockets inside the bag, I'm gonna use this solid here. Then you're gonna need a half a yard of vinyl. This vinyl is gonna be used for handles and the flap and a couple of accents. I would suggest something lightweight. Nothing heavy duty and nothing thick and stiff because we need that flap to be able to kind of bend. So I would definitely suggest a more lightweight vinyl. This is kind of like a faux suede-y looking leather. But you see how it has like nice drape. It's not really stiff. Some vinyl, when you hold it, it'll like stay straight out. This is nice and drapey. You want something like that. And then the pattern calls for a 1/4 yard of Decoville Light or something similar, and a 1/4 yard of Peltex or something similar. So you want stabilizer. You want a lightweight stabilizer and you want a heavier stabilizer. The lightweight stabilizer is what we're using for something like the flap, okay? And I really do suggest you use a lightweight stabilizer. On my first bag, I did use the Decoville Heavy on the flap, and I regret that because the flap does not fold. I also used a bit of a medium weight vinyl. So the flap is a little too stiff. So you want something lightweight. If you are using a medium weight vinyl or even just a lightweight vinyl, I would say for the flap, you could skip the Decoville Light. That's just my personal opinion. The Decoville Heavy is going to be used for the base of the bag. Now it does have a removable base, and you want this to be as firm as possible so you don't have a saggy bottom. Again, it is optional though. If you're going to be stuffing this with blankets and stuffies and stuff like that, then you don't really need a firm bottom. But Decoville Heavy is going to be great for the bottom of the bag. Decoville Light is going to be great for the flap. Okay, so not many hardware pieces today. I'll be using 2 zippers. First, you have your main zipper. This is going to be 22 inches or longer, number 5 zipper, and then I have a zipper pull to go with that. And then for the inside of the bag, I really like that zipper slip pocket edition. So I'm going to be using a 10-inch zipper for that, and then a zipper pull to go with it as well. Again, a number 5 zipper for this. For my main zipper, I do not sew those zipper ends well at all. I tried it. I'm just kind of a sloppy, not straight sewer. It's gonna look a lot better if I just use hardware. So that's what I'm gonna do. So both ends of my main zipper will be closed using this metal hardware right here. So I have my zipper ends and the screws that go with it. Then I have my snap for the flap. You could use a plastic snap or a metal snap. I do prefer the metal snaps. I just feel like they're a little bit sturdier. And then I have a bag tag to go on my bag as well. Okay, so here we have pretty much all the other stuff. Because I'm using that metal snap tab, I'm going to be using my rivet press to set it. So I have a hole punch and a rivet press to help with that. It makes it very easy, very quick. I have a couple pieces of tape here. I have paper tape. This is going to be to hold the pockets down on the inside of the bag while I move it from my table to my sewing machine so nothing moves around. This paper tape can easily be sewn over, which is really easy to work with. Then I have my double-sided tape. This is going to be to help hold things in place as well. The thread I'm going to be using through the needle is a Tex 45 weight thread. This is from Wizardry Stitchery in color Dusty Rose. And then the bobbin thread I'll be using is a Gutermann thread. My needle of choice is a Microtex 8012 as always. I'll be using a stiletto at the machine again to just help ease material in. It's like a third hand that if it gets hit with a needle, it doesn't hurt me. And then I have an air erasing marker and a vinyl ink marker because you never know which one you're going to need. A lighter for cleaning up all the loose threads. A 1" by 6" roller, again, just to help keep everything centered, straight, things like that. A good pair of scissors. I prefer the Kai. These are the Kai 7230 scissors. And then, as always, a healthy supply of plastic clips. All right, so let's go through the pattern pieces. Now, some of these are very, very big. This is going to be your main pattern piece. If you're going to be cutting it on the fold, you're going to have a fold line here and you're going to cut one piece of material using that. If you have a directional print, you're going to use the bottom dash line portion here and you're going to cut 2 pieces of material and then sew them together. I'm using 1 piece of material, so you can see I have this nice big cut and you can see this is the back. This back side is the inside of the bag. There is no lining. So Make sure you're good with that, okay? Next up are our 2 cuts of our straps. This is gonna be from your vinyl. There are a couple ways to do the straps. I wish I could do the folded one that's in the pattern, but unfortunately I just don't have that set of skills. You could add a little bit of like ribbon inside of it to make it super sturdy. I find the vinyl is just fine. So I'm just have 2 cuts of my strap. There are 2 different sizes of the straps. I'm using the tote length shoulder strap size. And then you're gonna have 2 cuts of your vinyl for the flap closure. And then you're gonna have 1 cut of your interfacing. This is going to be, for me, the Decoville Light, and this is a smaller cut, and we're just gonna attach that to one side of our flap. Next, I want to show you the pieces for the foldable bag base. This is a removable piece, so this is not sewn into the bag. This is just going to be 1 cut of your exterior material of choice. For me, this is kind of like my lining pocket material. Again, this is just the nylon material that I was using and everything. And then you're going to have 1 cut of your Decoville heavy or firm interfacing of choice for the center of the bag base, and then 2 cuts for the sides. I'm going to show you how to build this. I do really like that it is something you can take out because it makes it easier to use, but also it makes it a lot easier to wash the bag. So if the bag gets dirty, you don't have to worry about washing your firm base. You can just take it out. So I'll be doing 2 pockets. Both of them will be on the inside of the bag. First is the large interior back zipper pocket. This is a slip pocket with a zipper in it. So it is a slip pocket that we attach, and it has a zipper inside of it. To go with the zipper, you have 4 cuts of your zipper tab material here. I like to use the printed with this because it kind of stands out. I think it looks cool. And then you have your interior front pocket. This is just a basic slip pocket. You don't have to do the zipper pocket. You could just do a slip pocket. You don't have to do any pockets. If you're like, I just want this to be like a nice big tote that I'm just gonna stuff a bunch of stuff in, and I don't need any pockets, then you can leave off all the pockets, honestly. I forgot to mention this in the beginning, but you might also want to use some binding, at least, 42 inches of binding. It is optional if you don't really mind having the raw edges inside the bag, then that's fine. I find binding is very, very easy. This is pre-cut, water-resistant binding. I don't have to do anything with it. I just have to fold it around the edge and sew it down. And it looks very professional. So in my personal opinion, I would always suggest using binding. Again, this is no extra work. It comes like this. I don't have to cut it, fold it, bias tape it, nothing like that. It's very, very simple. So I do encourage you to use the binding. Okay, so one of the first things we want to do is transfer some mark. You'll see on your main panel here, you have a placement mark for your female snap placement front side and then your female snap placement back side. So if you haven't already decided, do that now. What's the front, what's the back? Honestly, with my material, it does not matter. I'm gonna mark placement for these on the wrong side of the material though, just in case I have to change where I place these later. So I'm looking at the wrong side here. And I'm gonna call this the front, so I'm just gonna write right up here in the seam an F. So I know that's for the front. So when I'm working on this, I remember this is the front of the bag. And then I'm gonna take my pattern piece and I'm gonna line it up with the top edge here. And where it says front side only, female snap placement, that's where I'm gonna mark a dot. Okay, it's a very, very small dot, but it's there. Then I'm gonna flip this over. And so this is gonna be the back. I don't really need to mark that on here. And I'm not going to because I'll get confused. So I'm just gonna leave it without writing back or anything on it, but I am gonna mark the dot for the back side. So I'm gonna lay my pattern piece over the back of my panel here, lining up all the edges, and I'm gonna mark placement for the female snap on the back, just like that. Now we're gonna wanna mark placement for the male part of the snap on the flap. Now I'm gonna have my snap go through both layers. So you will see the cap on the front of it, and then you'll see the male part of the snap on the bottom side of the flap. So I can just mark placement for this on one of them, and I can use that later to help me. I am marking it on the right side because I will be installing the snap when these are both right sides out. So I need to be able to see it. So I just marked that placement right there. Okay, so now pick one of your flap closures. It says to do it on the one that's not gonna have the marking for the snap placement. I think it's okay on either one, especially because I'm using a silver ink pen. Sometimes heat will make removable marks. My silver ink pen isn't going anywhere. So on the back side, I measured 1 inch down and 5/8 of an inch in from each side. And I'm just going to center my Decoville Light over that. I don't really like to iron right over the back of Decoville Light. You can, I have done it. It's not a big problem, I just don't like it. So I'm gonna cover the back of that, and then I'm gonna grab my iron and I'm just going to gently press down that Decovil light on the back of my flat piece. Okay, so now I have my interfacing adhered. That's really the only interfacing you have to adhere with your iron. The rest of it's just going to be inserted later. Okay, so starting with the shoulder straps, on the wrong side, you're going to want to mark the midpoint going right along the center lengthwise. And then the pattern has you draw these little rectangles. So these rectangles are 1 inch high, so they're going to be 1 inch up from the long edges of the strap and then 1/4 of an inch in from the short edges, and they're right on the corner, so they don't go to the center at all. The point of these are to tidy up the ends so you don't have any of the raw edges showing on the end. You could use strap ends. I did debate on doing that, just like little metal strap ends, but I decided not to, but you could if you wanted to. So what I'm doing now is just cutting out those little rectangles on the corners. So do this for both straps on both ends. You should have 4 corners cut out on each strap. So now you're going to add some double-sided tape that runs parallel to that middle line, and you're going to add it on both sides of that middle line, starting and stopping it about 1/2 of an inch from the short ends. I'm not measuring it. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. Double-sided tape is your friend when it comes to straps, because as much as you think you have control over the material, you don't always. All right, once you have the long pieces of double-sided tape there, then you're going to add short pieces of double-sided tape right along these little short ends that are remaining after you cut off the corners. So just add the double-sided tape to both sides on the short ends, and then repeat this with your other strap. Okay, now on these little short nubs sticking out, you're going to remove the paper from your tape, and then you're going to fold this back, wrong sides together, so that the folded edge lines up with the raw edges of your strap that's remaining. So now it's just nice and straight, just like that. So do this for all 4 of these little short bits on the ends. All right, once you have the short bits tucked in, now we're going to work on the long bits. So remove the paper from one side of your long strips of double-sided tape, and then we're just going to fold these long edges back, wrong sides together, to meet that midpoint mark. And it is always good for your material to not quite touch it. You want a little tiny bit of a gap between the raw edge of your material and that midpoint line. This is going to help reduce bulk and kind of like a squishy fat seam in the end. I'll show you what I mean. So just press that down, get it nice and straight, and then repeat with the other side. Again, not quite touching the mark with the raw edge, just getting close to it. So if you can see here, there's like a little bit of a gap between the raw edges of my strap material. And the reason you want that gap is because when you fold this, you're going to lose the gap. So once you start folding it in, these raw edges here are going to come right up to each other. If you start with them touching and you fold in, they're going to kind of crinkle in with one another, and you're going to find that you have like a really bulky fold here that's kind of messy. So by leaving that bit of a gap, it gives them just enough space to breathe before you bring them together. So now we're going to fold all of this in half again, kind of like a hot dog bun, and you should have no raw edges. So you see, once we fold this in over here on the side and we kind of tuck that in, you should be able to tuck in those little raw bits on the side there, and you have a nice clean fold on the short ends, and then obviously a nice clean fold on the long ends. One side of your strap has 2 folds, the other one just has the 1 main fold. I'm gonna use clips here to hold this together. If you wanted to use tape, you could use that as well. I'm just gonna use clips. And if you really wanna make sure these little raw bits don't show up in the end, you can kind of trim them down at an angle, just like that, so that when you fold this, those raw edges are tucked in completely and you don't see any of the raw vinyl. All right, so there's one strap. Now we're gonna repeat that with the other strap. Okay, so this is what my straps look like now, and I know that I wanna do the folded handle too. So in the pattern, you have the option, after you have it all like this, to fold it again so that both of those come together like that. Now it might actually work with this vinyl, however, it makes me nervous. There's no way I'm gonna be able to catch all the edges. I'll show you, see? So you would fold it all like this. That's gonna work best with a lightweight vinyl like what I'm using here. My worry is like, I just can't keep that even. So I'm not gonna do that method. However, if you're interested in like really soft, professional rolled handles. I did come across a YouTube video recently that I will link down below, and I'll link up on the top corner of the screen as well, that uses like this tube. And the process seemed really doable. I haven't done it yet, which is why I'm not gonna show you how to do it in today's tutorial, but I would recommend you go watch that video because I do have plans to try that as soon as I have a moment. I'm gonna try making those handles. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure 1.5 inches in from each short edge, and I'm just gonna make a mark using a removable marking pen. So this is an air erasing marking pen, something that is not permanent. I'm gonna do this for both short ends on both straps because I'm not gonna sew all the way to the end, and this lets me know where to stop. So now I'm gonna take these to the sewing machine, and I'm gonna top stitch along the long edges of my strap at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I'm just gonna top stitch right over those 1.5 inch in marks. I'm gonna do this for both of them. I do like to back stitch at the beginning and the end, and then I'm also gonna tie off the threads on the back once I'm done. All right, so once you have your straps done, you can set them to the side. So now let's work on the flap. If you haven't already, make your midpoint marks on the top edge. You could also add midpoint marks to the bottom, but I don't think it's necessary. What I am gonna do though is make sure that my snap placement is on the midpoint. So I'm just folding my flap panel in half that has that snap placement, and I can see that my dot is on the fold, so that's good. So I know it is on the midpoint. And my snap is gonna go through both layers, so I already have the Decovil light on the back here. I don't have to add any other interfacing or anything like that. If you're gonna be using like a plastic snap and you're only gonna have it go through one layer of your vinyl, you need to make sure on the back side where you have the mark for the snap, you have a little piece of interfacing there. If the snap is only going through a layer of vinyl and that's it, eventually it will rip out of your vinyl. So you don't want that to happen. So make sure you have a little extra piece of reinforcement on the back side where your mark is for your snap, especially if it's only going through one layer of material. So I'm gonna take both of my flap pieces and lay them right sides together, lining up all the edges. And then I'm add clips around all of this to hold it together. Now we measured a 4-inch opening, so 2 inches on each side of that midpoint on the top straight edge, and that will be our turning hole. So now we're gonna go and we're gonna start at one of those edges, and we're going to sew around the ends of the flat part and the curved bit and the bottom, all at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, making sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end here. The pattern does suggest that you actually go off the side, so when you start sewing in from the edge of your raw material on the straight side and then sew around, whatever's easiest for you. So can you see how we did that, how we sewed in from the top and then along the seam allowance? All right, I don't have pinking shears, so I'm just going to gently cut down the corners up here. And then I also shave off a little bit along the edges as well. I feel like that helps with those corners. Don't cut too close to your stitching or else the material will rip. And that won't be good. And then around the curved bits, I'm just snipping into the seam allowance with my scissors about halfway through, maybe a little bit more than halfway. I'm getting somewhat close to the stitching, but not touching it or anything. Again, we don't want our material to rip around those threads. Now we're gonna take our flap and flip it right side out gently. So once you have it mostly turned out, grab your turning tool of choice and gently go in and straighten out, smooth out all your seams. If you find that one part is just bubbling a little bit too much, you can kind of flip it back through the hole and you can cut into that seam more. Sometimes it actually helps to just shave down the seam around the corners and then cut little notches in there. So whatever's easiest. But rounded corners can get a little bulky if your seam allowance is on the larger sides. So if you need to, just trim the seam allowance by about half around the corners. I'm gonna go ahead and do that on the other side too. And then make sure you go up to these top corners over here and poke those out as well as you can, gently, but you want it to be a nice sharp corner. All right, now when I'm going around the seam here, I'm gonna kind of roll it out with my fingers and then add a clip. If you're using not vinyl for this, which you don't have to use vinyl for this, honestly, you can press this with an iron, Or you can press it with an iron even if you are using vinyl. Just make sure you cover it with a piece of pressing cloth first, like a piece of quilt cotton. You don't want your iron to directly touch the vinyl or else it could melt it. So right now I'm just rolling out the sides and the bottom. I'm leaving the top where the opening is unclipped for the moment. Okay, now the spot over here where we have the opening, you want this to be as straight as possible. So give it a good eyeball. And I'm gonna clip around it, but I'm gonna use double-sided tape to help hold it in place. I'm just gonna grab like a little 3-inch piece of double-sided tape. And I'm gonna open up that opening in here. And I'm gonna add my tape to the folded over bit, remove the paper, and then fold it all back down, nice and flat and straight. There we go. So make sure it looks good. So now I'm gonna grab a ruler and I'm gonna measure from the top left corner here down the side 5/8 of an inch, and using an air erasing marker, I'm just gonna mark right there. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side, because when we top stitch, we're not top stitching the whole thing. We're top stitching 5/8 of an inch from the top. Okay, so I have my 2 marks on the sides. Both of them are 5/8 of an inch from the top folded edge. Now I'm gonna take this to the sewing machine, and starting at one of those 5/8 of an inch mark, I'm gonna top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around the side and the bottom until I get to the other mark at the 5/8 inch mark. I am gonna back stitch the beginning and the end, and I'm gonna tie off the threads on the back. The vinyl I'm using is a little, it's not sticky, but it sticks to my presser foot, so the stitches are not quite as long as I had wanted them to be. But that's okay. That's why I use thread that matches the vinyl, just in case that happens. So that way it's not as noticeable. I mean, if you look close, you'll see the stitches are very close together. They're not really the top stitching length that I like, but you can't really notice. So like I said, I'm just tying off the threads. So this is what I mean by tying them off. I bring both the top and the bobbin thread to the back side of the flap, and I just tie them into like 3 little knots. And then cut down that tail, and then with the little tiny pigtails that are left from cutting down the thread, I just carefully melt it with a lighter, and they tuck in on themselves. So I'm gonna do that on both sides. Okay, so the pattern says to install the male end of the snap on the flap. However, that will not work for me because my decorative metal snap, the cap only works with the female end. So I'll be installing the female end on the flap, and I'll be doing the male ends on the main part. That'll be fine. So first thing I'm gonna do is I have my mark here still for my snap. I'm just gonna refold this again and make sure it's still on the midpoint, because sometimes when we sew, things can shift. It's mostly centered, maybe just a tidbit towards the left. So I'm just going to make a mark right on the fold where it should be. There we go. So now I'm gonna grab my hole punch, and I'm gonna punch a hole. I'm punching a hole through both layers of my flap vinyl. And then I'm gonna grab the die set for the female side, since I'm doing the female snap here. Okay, so on the right side of the flap, the part you're gonna see when it's closed, I'm gonna put the cap. So I'm just gonna insert that through the hole. And then on the bottom side of the flap, I'm going to put the female snap, just like this, insert it into my rivet press, and just press this down. And there we go, there's my flap, nice and secure. So now I can set all this to the side. Okay, so now let's build the interior front pocket, which is very simple. Take your piece of material for the pocket and fold it so it's right sides together, short sides together, and clip along all 3 raw edges. And then I measured and marked a 3-inch opening on the short edge up here on the top. And we're gonna take this to the sewing machine, and we're gonna sew along the sides and on the top corners at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, making sure we leave this bit between the 2 marks open and unsewn, and backstitch around both those marks and backstitch on the corners where the fold is. All right, once those are sewn, I'm just gonna cut down the corners so that I can get a nice smooth corner in the end. And on these sewn corners, I like to trim down the edges just a little bit more. And then we're gonna just turn this pocket out through that opening that we left. And then use your turning tool to help poke out those corners and get this nice and straight and squared up. Okay, now we're gonna press this down. If you're using material that you can use an iron with, go ahead and do that. The opening I'm leaving on the bottom. The pattern's gonna have you leave it on the top, but I am just so sloppy. So I'm leaving it on the bottom, and I'm going to top stitch the top as the folded edge. So the area that's nice and clean and perfectly folded, that's gonna be the top of my pocket because it looks good. And you see this, and you won't see this bottom edge so much, but I am gonna still add a couple clips to the bottom just to hold that in place. And now we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to top stitch along this top clipped edge here with the fold at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then do another row of top stitching at about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance as well, just to give it a nice pretty look. I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and the end, but I'm also going to tie off the threads. All right, once you have this slip pocket all prepped, you can set it to the side. All right, so now we're going to do the large back interior slip pocket with zipper. It's a lot of words. So I have my main material. I think I have like fingerprints on it. It's kind of funny. And then it says the zipper should be 9 3/4 of an inch. So it can be 10 inches or 9 3/4 of an inch. And then you're going to need your 4 little zipper tabs. So with your zipper, you're going to lay one of your tabs right side down on the right side of the zipper, and then clip these together, right sides together. Do the same thing with the other side. So now we take this to the sewing machine, and we're just going to baste along both sides here at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to hold that zipper tab in place. Now take your zipper and flip it so you're looking at the wrong side, and grab your 2 remaining zipper tabs. Take one of them and lay it right side down on the wrong side of the zipper, lining it up with that short edge you just basted. Repeat on the other side of your zipper tape. Now sew along these 2 clipped ends at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end each time. All right, important thing to remember with zipper tape is that raw edges fray. So you can see this one's already fraying a little bit. So before we move on, I'm gonna grab a lighter and I'm just gonna melt down, hopefully not catch it on fire. I'm just gonna melt down the raw edges of the zipper tape. There we go. So now we're gonna fold both of these zipper tabs back, wrong sides together, lining up the short raw edges, and I do like to add clips just to make sure it doesn't twist around on me. Do this for both sides. And now, keeping these tabs nice and taut and straight, we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch right along the folds next to the zipper teeth at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance on both sides. I do like to back stitch at least 1 stitch on each edge just to make sure it doesn't unravel later. All right, now we want to take our zipper and we want to find the midpoint. So I'm just going to fold this in half, and I am matching up where the seams are that we just top stitched. That's what I'm matching up first, and then I'm going to find the midpoint. You can use a pen for this, or you can use scissors. Just remember what I said. When you cut zipper tape, any raw edges are going to fray. So I'm going to use scissors, and I'm cutting just a teeny itty bitty triangle on the corner of that fold. And I'm going to open this up, and where I cut, I'm going to grab my lighter and just melt. That way I don't have to worry about this fraying. Now I'm going to grab my panel for the pocket, and I'm going to find the midpoint on the 2 short edges. Again, just by folding them and pinching, and then making a teeny tiny cut on the corner. So I'm going to grab my pocket and lay it right side up, and then I'm going to grab my zipper, and I'm going to lay my zipper right side down. And in the end, I want this to be the bottom part of my pocket. This pocket piece will fold up and come down. I'll show you. But this is going to be the bottom of my pocket, which means my zipper, when it's closing, it's going to go closing towards the left, just like this. And I'm going to lay my zipper right side down, matching it up with the midpoints. So midpoint of zipper matched up with midpoint of short end of this pocket. And I'm going to clip these right sides together. And your zipper tabs should extend all the way to the end. I do find that they do not extend further, so you got to make sure you measured everything correctly. If the zipper tabs do extend a little bit farther because maybe your zipper tape was a little long, that's okay. Just use the midpoints and we'll clean it up later. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew along this top clipped edge at 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure we backstitch at the beginning and the end, and also make sure you use your zipper foot here. Once you have that sewn in place, you're going to flip this so the zipper's right side up and the material's right side up, and fold it so that the zipper and the seam go behind the material on the bottom here. Once you have that nice and taut and straight, you can press it with an iron or press it with a seam roller or just your fingers like I am. we're gonna top stitch right along that bottom edge on the seam at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Okay, now if you'd like, this is actually a really great place to put your bag tag. I would just center it and put it about 1 inch down below your zipper. I think I'm gonna do my bag tag on the exterior of the bag this time, but on the first bag, this is where I put it, and it's a great spot. So now we need to attach the other end of our pocket to the other end of our zipper. So I'm just going to bring my short end up, right sides together, with the opposite edge of the zipper tape, and using those midpoint marks, I'm going to clip these right sides together. And now let's go sew along that clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Okay, this next part's a little tricky. So you're gonna wanna do the top stitching just like we did before, except now we have a bit of a tube situation here. So what I like to do is just like what the pattern does. I'm going to just kind of turn this into a little tube here. And I'm gonna be top stitching over here on the right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna start it from the top here, and I'm just gonna feed it underneath the presser foot, carefully kind of pulling the material away from the zipper, making sure that seam stays on the right side behind the material. And I'm just going to weave it underneath the presser foot all the way from one edge to the other. It sounds trickier than it is. Just give it a try. If you don't want to do it, then you can just leave it on top stitch and I think you'll be fine. Okay, so now keep this wrong side out, and with the zipper tape, wrong side up, and when the zipper closes, it's closing towards the right. We're going to measure this top folded edge here. So this is like the bottom of the material, but we're gonna have it be the top now. The top folded edge, you're gonna measure 1.5 inches down. So I just have a couple of these little marks here. These are all 1.5 inches down. I'm just gonna fold along those marks and clip along that fold. Okay, so now keep this nice and flat, and you're gonna flatten out the bottom here. So if you need to grab an iron or anything to flatten this out, you can do that. I'm just gonna kind of willy-nilly it. And once I get it flat, I'm going to clip along the bottom edge as well, where that fold is. And you can just do light clips here if you'd like. And then we're gonna clip along the sides. So I'm gonna start with one side. So I'm clipping this side over here on the right. These are raw edges of material. And before I clip the other side, I'm gonna reach in and I'm gonna open the zipper because we are gonna turn this all out through the zipper. So open the zipper all the way. And then I will clip along the sides. So there's really no reason to clip the fold on the top and the bottom of this because we're not sewing there. To me, it's just to square it up properly, to make sure it's the size and the shape I want it to be, so it's not all wonky or anything. So now we're gonna go sewing machine and we're gonna sew along the two sides. So not the top and bottom, only the sides, the raw edge sides. Sew along both of those at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have those sewn, you can take the clips off the folded edges. And then I'm gonna grab my scissors and I'm just going to cut down the corners. Only the corners, nowhere else. And now let's flip this out so it's right side out. And then once again, grab your turning tool and poke out the corners. Okay, so you see when you close it, looks just like that. Zipper closes to the left, opens to the right. So now, I want to press all these edges. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use clips along the seams. I'm just going to roll out these seams and use clips to kind of flatten it out. If you want to iron this, you can. Just again, be aware of your material and whether or not you can have the iron directly touch the material or not. And then once I have the sides lined up, now I'm going to focus on this top edge here because I'm going to top stitch this. So get that as straight as you can. So now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch along just only this top edge, just this top folded edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I'll do another row of stitching at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and the end and then tie off those threads on the back side. All right, so this big old zipper slip pocket is all prepped. We can set this to the side. All right, so now we're gonna attach the zipper to the bag. So I cut my zipper tape to about 24 inches long. You can always trim it down at the end, but right now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna find the midpoint on this zipper tape. Just like we did before, if you trim down zipper tape anywhere, you need to melt it. There we go. So now, either side, since we don't have the zipper pull on yet, it doesn't really matter if you're doing the front or the back, but make sure you have the midpoint marked on both front and back top bits of your panel. I'm gonna take my zipper tape and I'm gonna lay it right side down, right sides together with the top of the panel. And I'm going to grab some clips and clip these together. So I always start at the midpoint and then work my way out to the left and the right. All right, so now we're gonna sew along this top edge of our zipper at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have that sewn on, you're going to push the seam with the zipper tape behind your main panel. So if you need to iron this, you can iron this. If you want to just finger press it, you can finger press it. Remember, there's no zipper pull on here yet. It's just the zipper tape. We're gonna separate these in just a minute. You know that. You know if we don't have a zipper pull on, it's because we're gonna take it apart pretty soon. So get this nice and straight and take this back to the sewing machine and top stitch right along the seam on the main panel, holding that zipper tape and seam behind the main panel at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitch at the beginning and the end. All right, now we have that top stitched on. It looks nice. Now I'm going to take the other end of my main panel and I'm going to fold my main panel up, right sides together. I'm going to line up the midpoint on the unsewn end of the main panel with the midpoint on the unsewn side of the zipper tape. And I'm going to clip these. So the zipper and the other side of your main panel, whether it's the back or the front, are now right sides together. And just clip these together along that top edge. Now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew along this top clipped edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. All right, now, yep, we got to do it. Remove the zipper tape from each other. Split the zipper tape and go to the side that you just sewed on, and you're going to turn it so that the back edge, the raw edge of the zipper tape, goes behind the main panel. The teeth are on the top. Give it a good finger press. Press it with your iron if you need to. If you want to use double-sided tape here also to hold it down, whatever makes this easiest for you. I'm just going to kind of finger press it and then just deal with it at the machine. Because now, just like I did on the other side, I'm going to go top stitch right along the edge of my main panel at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, holding the seam behind the main panel, and I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and the end. Alrighty, so don't forget we have the marks on the back of our main panels for the other snaps. So these are going to be for me, these are going to be for the male snaps. I have one on the front, one on the back panel. I'm not going to attach those just yet, but I have the marks there for future reference. So if you haven't marked it already, go ahead and mark it. So now we're going to work on the front panel. And if you need a reminder, the front panel has the snap that's a little bit higher up. So I'm going to lay this so the front panel is wrong side up, just like this. And I have a midpoint mark here because I have that cut in my zipper and main panel right there at the top. And I'm going to grab my little slip pocket here, and I'm going to mark a midpoint on the top edge of my slip pocket. And I'm just going to use this air erasing marker. It's not going to be noticeable for very long, but that's okay. So now I'm going to measure 1 inch down from just underneath the seam. So just like that, I'm going to line up my ruler right underneath that seam where the zipper tape is, 1 inch down, and I'm going to match up the midpoint on my slip pocket with that midpoint on my ruler, just like that. And now I'm going to grab my paper tape. It's heavy, so I'm just going to put it over my pocket so it doesn't move. And I'm going to tape this down. So if you haven't straightened out all of the seams, you might want to do that. I'm not that picky. Even if I spend all this time to make sure these seams are perfectly straight, by the time I get done sewing it on, they're going to be a little wonky. It's just how I sew things. It's fine. So now I'm going to remove the clips on this bottom edge here. Again, the bottom edge has the hole on the opening, so I'm going to be careful to make sure that stays folded, taped down. And now we're going to take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew along the sides and the bottom, all at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm just going to top stitch this. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end. If you want to do a second row stitching, go ahead and do that, but I'm just going to do one row. Okay, so you can see I did sew over that paper tape. That's why I like that tape, because it's very easy to sew over, and it's very easy to take out of the seams. Be gentle, just, you know, you're pulling on thread here, but it's easy to remove it. So now, since the back side of this pocket is the right side of my bag, I'm going to pull all the threads to the pocket side. So you can see I'm just pulling on my top thread here, and I'm going to tie them off on this side, so not on the right side of the exterior. I'm just going to tie them off on this pocket side over here. Okay, so that's the back of the front panel. Now let's work on the back panel. So have the back panel exterior facing right side up. If you don't have a midpoint, let's mark one. So I'm just going to fold this in half match up the side edges here, go along the top here, and I'm gonna use an air erasing marker to mark my midpoint right on this seam here so I know where everything goes. There we go. So this part is a little tricky because you've got seams and stuff. Let me just show you. We need to mark placement for our straps and for our flap. So I'm gonna take my pattern piece here and I'm gonna line up these bottom boxed corners here because since I sewed my zipper down, I can't line it up on the top edge anymore. So lining it up with the bottom corners here, just like that, I poked a hole in all 4 corners of both of these strap placement boxes. So boom, 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 boom. Poked a hole in there, and now I'm just gonna insert my marking tool into those 4 holes for each strap placement. And I can also go ahead, I poked a hole on the ends of the flap placement line as well, so I can just mark in those as well. You do want to use some sort of a marking tool that's not permanent, so consider that. Okay, once I have all my marks on here, I'm going to use a ruler and I'm just going to connect the 4 lines for the strap placement to create a little box. All right, I don't know if you can see, I'll try to put a diagram up here, but I have my 2 rectangles drawn onto my material, and then I also drew out that straight line for the flap placement. Now I gotta be quick before this all erases. So the first thing we're gonna sew down is the flap. So we're gonna take the bottom edge of the flap and we're gonna line it up right with that flap mark that's on our material. If you want to use double-sided tape, you can definitely do that. If you want to add a couple clips along the zipper like the pattern suggests, you can do that as well. With the mark, I find I really don't need the double-sided tape, so I just grabbed a ruler to draw a straight line from one end of the top stitching we already did on the flap to the other end of the top stitching that's already on the flap. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to start where our top stitching ends, and we're going to top stitch along the bottom edge of our flap and then along the bottom folded edge of the strap all the way over, up the other side to where the top stitching is, and then once again we're just going to top stitch right over that mark. Okay, so this is what the flap should look like now. Now, before everything erases, I am going to add my bag tag here. So I'm going to put a little piece of double-sided tape on the back of my bag tag, and I'm going to center this just underneath my flap. And I am eyeballing this. Is a good chance it is not centered. But I'm centering it just underneath my flap, about 1/2 of an inch below it, and I'm just going to top stitch around all 4 edges of my bag tag at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so here is the current state of the back of my bag. Now we want to attach the strap. So I still have my little strap rectangles here, and so I'm going to lay my strap so it's top stitching right side up, and I'm just going to lay the end of it over that little rectangle, just like that. Now I'm going to use tape to help hold it in place, but with the marks, you really don't need to add any tape here. You can just kind of eyeball it. If you have a preference on which side your double fold goes, think about that now. I'm going to have it go into the center. So on the outside here, it's just that single fold. And I'm going to add some double-sided tape to the bottom of my strap. And then I'm just going to tape it over that little box, just like that. I'm also going to add a couple of clips along the top edge here. And I'm going to tape down both edges. And you might want to transfer some of these marks over. So for example, the top edge of the box here, I'm just going to transfer that to my strap. All right, now I'm going to top stitch around the 3 edges of this strap and then right over that mark, all at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then I think I'm also going to do a little X inside the box once I'm done, just to make sure it's nice and sturdy. And I'm going to do this for both edges of my strap. Okay, so that's how I attach the strap on the back panel. Now you're going to go to the front panel with the front panel right side up. And once again, you're going to grab your template and line it up with the bottom boxed edges. And then using those holes in the strap placement boxes, use your marking tool to transfer the 4 corners to your front panel. Again, doing your best to keep everything nice and flat and straight and lined up. And you should not be going over your pocket. You can feel the pocket on the lining side. You should not be drawing on that pocket. You're not going to be sewing over that pocket. And then once you have those 4 corners marked, you can grab a ruler to create the little boxes again. And then using double-sided tape in your remaining strap, you are going to sew down the ends of your strap over that box, just like we did on the back panel. I'm going to do all of that off camera because it's exactly the same as we did on the other side. All right, so now we have both the straps attached, one to the back panel, one to the front panel. Now we're going to go to the back panel and lay it wrong side up. And this is the side with the flap. Keep your front panel out of the way. Grab your zipper slip pocket or just your back slip pocket. And we want to mark the midpoint on the top edge of this pocket. Once again, I'm just going to use my air erasing marker. And just like we did on the front, we're going to measure down 1 inch. I'm just going to measure down 1 inch from the bottom of my zipper tape here, not from the very top where the zipper is. And I'm going to use the midpoint mark that's on that zipper tape and the midpoint mark that's on my pocket. And then once again, I'm going to grab that paper tape and I'm going to tape this down. So I'm doing my best to keep this straight, but most likely this is a little crooked. Just look around, make sure it's not terribly crooked. If it's not perfectly straight, that's fine. It's not going to be noticeable in the end. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch along the sides and the bottom, all at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end of the top here. You could even do a second row of stitching, but you really want to make sure you reinforce the stitches on the top of this slip pocket because that's what's going to get pulled on the most. All right, once you have that stitched in place, if you want to add rivets to the top corners, you can. If you want to pull the threads back, that's always a good idea because you want this to be as secure as possible. All right, now we can attach our zipper. And if you want to do 2 zipper pulls, you can. You can make this a double zip. I'm just going to do a single zip. So we're going to pull our panels together. And I'm going to insert the zipper on once, and then I'm going to pull it off and insert it again. And that's going to allow the ends to stay closed. So it doesn't really matter which way you put it on the first time. So you can see I'm just inserting the zipper pull on there, pulling it all the way through and off. So now it's connected. And just try to remember which way is the front, which way is the back. So this is the front panel here. The flap is on the back panel. It'll fold down just like that. So I want my zipper to come from the right to the left with the front panel facing right side up. So I'm just going to spread open the right side of my zipper tape and insert the zipper pull on there again, and then just slide it on. And this allows my zipper to be closed on both ends. So the tape is nice and closed. I don't have to worry about it opening up. So now we're going to take our bag and flip it inside out. And you can open up a little bit in the center of your zipper tape so that you can get your straps and flap out of the way. So now we have it all wrong side out. We're going to work on the sides over here. So pull the raw edges of the side of your material, right sides together. Grab some clips and clip along the side edge. You're going to clip all the way from the bottom box corner to right below the zipper. So do this on both sides. All right, so now we're going to sew along both these sides at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Couple things to note about this. First, you're not going to sew over the zipper tape. So I would start even like 1/4 of an inch below the bottom edge of the raw edge of your zipper tape. So just about 1/4 inch below it. Back stitch at the beginning and the end. Go all the way down to the box corner and back stitch there as well. I did find that increasing the seam allowance to a 1/2 inch seam allowance only on the bottoms where the box corner is helped me box this in the next step. That is optional. You can just leave it as 3/8 of an inch, and if you find that you do need to increase it, you can go back later and do it, which I think what I'll do for now is I'll just leave it all at 3/8 of an inch, and if we can't get the boxed bottoms to line up, then we'll go back and we'll do a 1/2 of an inch just on the bottom edge. All right, once you have the sides sewn, find the midpoint on the bottom edge of your box bottom. So what I'm doing is I'm just folding this down, and then I'm going to cut it with my scissors. Just a little tiny triangle cut right on that fold. And then you're gonna bring the seam right sides together with that box bottom and line it up. And I'm not gonna sew this yet because I wanna attach the binding to the sides first. I'm just trying to see if I need to adjust my seam allowance. Okay, so that lines up pretty well. If you find that you have something something like this or like this, where one, you just can't seem to line them up without the sides coming down a lot, then you can increase your seam allowance on the side over here to a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and that'll help tighten it up. But before we box these, I do want to attach the binding to the sides. So I'm going to grab my binding, and I'm just going to lay it over my side here. And I'm just going to have it overhang by about 1 inch on the bottom. And then I'm going to take my binding and I'm going to fold it in half, wrong sides together, long sides together. And I'm going to take the top short edge and I'm going to fold that down by about 1/2 inch, just so I don't have a raw edge here. And then with that folded top edge down, I'm going to wrap my binding around the side here. And my binding is going to come up as far as my stitching, so no farther than that. And then I'm just going to fold and wrap the binding around this side seam that I just sewed all the way down to the bottom, and my binding should overhang the bottom edge a little bit. So I have the binding wrapped around one side edge. I'm going to repeat that with the other side edge that I've sewn already. So once you have this in place, now you can just take this to the sewing machine and you can top stitch your binding down at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. If you did find that you needed to increase your seam allowance to 1/2 inch on the bottom where the box corners are, go ahead and do that now. All right, if you have any binding overhanging on the bottom, you can trim that down so it matches up with the end of your material. And now we're going to box the corners by folding the material right sides together, bringing that seam on the side to meet the midpoint mark on the bottom of your bag, and clipping along the boxed straight edge. So do this for both sides. And I take that side seam that's bound and I just fold it to one side. It doesn't matter which direction, but you obviously can't press it open since it has the binding on it. You just fold it to one side. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and sew along both of these clipped boxed edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Alrighty, once those bottom edges are boxed, we can add a little bit of binding to them. So it's again, I'm just going to I'm just making sure my binding is longer than I need it to be. That's pretty much what I'm doing, because I can always trim it down after I attach it, but I can't make it longer once it's sewn on there. Once I have it cut, once again, I'm just going to fold my binding, wrong sides together, long sides together, and then I'm going to wrap it around that boxed bottom seam, grab some clips, and clip it in place. So do this for both edges of your boxed bottom. All right, once you have the binding clipped in place, once again, we're just going to top stitch over these two edges at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Once you have it sewn on, you're going to want to trim down your binding. So be careful when you're trimming this down. You don't want to trim down your material. Don't cut that exterior material. You're only cutting the ends of your binding. So it doesn't have to be perfectly against the fabric. Okay, no one's going to see. Just make sure the binding isn't all hanging off the edge. And see, isn't that nice? I mean, that's the thing about binding. It's not a lot of extra work, but it gives it a very professional polished finish, which I really like. So now we're going to gently flip the bag right side out. And you're going to want to flip your zipper tape through that hole. You should have a very, very, very small gap here on the side where you can kind of pull your zipper tape through. So do this on both sides. All right, so this is what your bag should be looking like. It's so stinking cute. Now, if you're using the sewn zipper ends, you're gonna go ahead and trim down your zipper tape and then just wrap around the zipper end on the end here and then sew it down in place. I'm not using the sewn on ones, so I gotta figure out how I'm gonna do this, because I wanna install my zipper end over the end here, but I also have this material down here to deal with. So I'm going to trim down my zipper tape and see how much I need to, how close I need to get it to the fabric. All right, so I'm just cutting my zipper tape so it's like really close to the fabric, just like that. You could have it longer if you wanted it longer, Like you could keep it out to here if you'd like. So you see you can have it look like this, where it just kind of hangs off the end. I mean, it'll look neater than it does right now. But it would be like that, or you can have it right up against the material. I do really like it right up against the material. So I didn't show these two things in the beginning. I do apologize, but these are very important when you're doing anything with these tiny screws. Beacon 3-in-1 glue and small screwdriver set. And I'm just gonna put my screws in the top here. So with the end that I'm happy with, once I have it the length I want it, I'm gonna melt down the edges. And I'm just kind of folding the ends together so I have a nice sharp point here. And then I'm gonna grab my glue and I'm gonna dollop some glue right on the end of my zipper right here. And then I'm gonna take my metal zipper end and I'm just going to shove it right over the edge. Just like that. And it's nice and tight on the back here like I want it. And then I'm gonna grab one of my little screws here and a teeny tiny screwdriver. And I'm just gonna screw the zipper end in place. Nice and tight. And if you wanna put some glue in the screw hole, you can definitely do that. But you just wanna make sure this is not going anywhere. So that looks nice. I like it. All right, so I'm gonna repeat that on the other side. So I'm once again gonna cut this nice and short. There we go. And then I'm just gonna wrap the ends around and melt down the end of my zipper tape. And if you need to cut off the edges of your zipper tape, you can do that. Just as always, make sure you melt it down a bit. I'm gonna get a nice sharp point here, nice and close to the material. Do a generous amount of glue on this. Really don't want this going anywhere. And then grab the metal zipper end and shove it over the edge, nice and tight. And then flip it over, grab your screwdriver and screw this in place. All right, here we go. The bag portion is sewn. Now we just need to add the rest of the snaps and the base. Okay, so speaking of snaps, I'm gonna attach 2 male snaps. First thing I wanna do is just kind of fold down my flap and figure out where I have my marking for the male snap. So it's right here. And make sure that's where I'm gonna want it in the end. And I think that's gonna be okay. So you can see I have 2 sets of male ends of the snap. Using my hole punch, I'm gonna reach in and I'm going to punch the hole on the front panel. Not going through the pocket, only going through the front panel. And I don't have any sort of extra interfacing or anything here for that. With these male snaps, I really don't think you need it. I'm gonna grab my rivet press and I have the die set for the male side of these fashion snaps. And so for the male snaps, I have a longer bit. It's like a longer stem and a short stem. The longer stem is gonna go in through the back side of the material. And it's gonna poke through to the front. And then the shorter stem goes over it on the front, on the right side. And then we're just going to press this in place. Okay, so when I close this and I fold this over, yeah, that looks nice. And my flap is not too structured or sturdy. And the metal snaps just hold really well. I feel like the metal snaps hold a lot better than the plastic snaps do. So there we go, there's that. So now we need to see where the other snap goes. So I'm going to just lay my bag like this. It has the front right side up. I'm folding up the base like this. We're going to move this out of the way. Fold in one side, fold in the other side, fold it up by about a third, and then fold it up another third, and then the flap is gonna go wrap around like this to snap in place. So I'm just kind of making a little memory mark right there, and I wanna see where that is. So I don't know if you guys remember, but we did make a mark on the back of our back panel, and that's where I need it to be. So this part's a little tricky. I'm gonna grab my hole punch, and I'm gonna try to punch out that hole without punching through the pocket or anything else. Not punching through the flap, not punching through the pocket, only punching through the material on the back panel. So I'm just kind of like rolling it up. Might be easier if you use the hole punch attachment for your rivet press, but I'm just gonna do this because I like things to be difficult. Okay, so I got that punched. So I'm gonna take the longer male end snap piece and I'm gonna put my hand inside the bag, again, only through the back panel, and I'm gonna insert that part of the snap there. I'm gonna take the shorter bit on top. We're gonna line this up in our rivet press and then just press it in place. Okay, so let's make sure that works. So I'm gonna close my bag, have the front right side up, the bottom I have folded up so you can see it's like this. I have it folded up flat. I'm gonna fold in one side, I'm gonna fold in the other side, and then I'm gonna flip up the bottom by about a third and then roll it up again. Oh, there's my snap. Then I can pull my flap down and snap it into place. Oh, look at that. It's all tucked in. So cute. That's adorable. I just love that. And then there's my tag on the back, so you can always see it even when it's rolled up. I love it. Okay, you can set this to the side for just a moment. Okay, the last bit is the foldable bag base. So grab your panel for that and lay it so it's short edges together, right sides together. And clip along the 3 raw edge sides to hold in place. Now measure in 1 inch on the top from each corner, because that's as far as you're gonna sew. Okay, now we're gonna sew along one side at a 3/8 inch seam allowance all the way to the top corner and then in 1 inch. Make sure you backstitch at the fold on the bottom and also at that 1 inch mark. Do this for both sides so you should have a nice big opening on that short edge. Okay, and what you also probably wanna do right now is fold down the edges of this opening. Now, you might find that easiest to do with some double-sided tape. So I'm gonna open this up a bit and I'm gonna grab a ruler. And I'm going to measure in 3/4 of an inch from the raw edge. And this might have been easier to do before you flipped it, but that's okay. So 3/4 of an inch from the raw edge. I'm just drawing a line like that. And then I'm going to grab the double-sided tape. And I'm cutting off about 4 inches or so of it. It doesn't have to be terribly precise. We just want to fold down these edges because it's going to be a lot harder to make this look nice if we leave them up like this. So I'm just going to fold the raw edge back to meet that marked line and sticking it over that double-sided tape. So I'm gonna do this on both sides. Again, it's not super precise, it's not super fancy or anything like that. I just need to keep it folded down so I don't have to deal with it later. Okay, so both of my edges on my opening are now folded in. And I'm actually gonna grab some clips and just clip them as well. We're not closing this yet, but I don't want these to unfold while we do the next step. And if you wanna clip around the edges as well, if you find that your seams are kind of pulling in on themselves, you wanna get nice and straight and flat, you can clip over there, but you don't have to. This part is a little loosey-goosey, so it's not necessary. So now we're going to find the center along the top edge of our material, and that's where I have the opening still. We're going to mark a line there. And then you're going to measure 2 inches to the right of that midpoint line and draw a vertical line, and then measure 2 inches to the left of that midpoint and draw a vertical line. So you should have 2 lines that are perpendicular to the opening on the top here. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch over these 2 lines using our top stitch length. So you're going to go right over them, make sure you back stitch at the top and the bottom, and make sure the top edge here where the opening is, it stays folded in. Don't have the raw edges poking out. It needs to stay folded in. Okay, once you have those top stitching lines done, you'll see you have like 3 little pockets now on the top, and that's where you're just going to insert these. So the larger piece goes in the center. We're just going to insert that right into the center there. And then these shorter or more narrow pieces go into the side. You might have to kind of taco these, so just kind of fold it like a little taco and insert it into the side, and then use your fingers to unfold it and flatten it out once it's in there. And then do the same thing on the other side. All right, and once you have it all nice and flat in there, we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're just gonna top stitch right along this edge here that has the opening. Top stitch at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to close it all up, and you can back stitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so let's see how this goes in here. Let's open up our bag and unzip it on the top. Flatten out that base, and then this is nice and firm. And you could even add like 2 layers of your firm stabilizer in each of these pockets if you want it like super structured. You can see we just insert this into the bag, line it up on the bottom there, and now you have a nice firm base. So when you use this just as a regular tote, it's nice and structured, even though it is still very loosey-goosey. How cute is that? Nice and firm down here. And I'm going to show you how to fold it with that base as well. So if you want to fold it up and you have that firm base in there, you can take the firm base out, zip up your bag with the front facing up, and then the bottom here folded up like that. Once again, we're going to fold in the sides. And then you can take your base and fold the sides in on your base just like that. Fold the bottom up around the base, and then fold it all up again, just like that. And then snap down the flap. And there you go. You have your bag and your base is in there, and it's all cute and easy to use. How fun is this? This is so fun. I love this, and it's a really great bag if you want to like showcase your nylon material and stuff. I think this is a fun bag. I hope you guys love it. All right, what do you guys think? Let me just tell you, using the Decoville light on the flap, so much better. I should have done that the first time. And then also using a metal snap, I think it's really good too, especially if you're using a material that's a little firmer, that's kind of fighting this hold. The metal snap is going to be a lot better. And don't forget, in this one that we kind of switched it up, I decided to use 2 male snaps and 1 female snap instead of what the pattern suggested, purely just because my male snaps are more lightweight and it made it a lot easier for installation. But look how stinking cute this bag is. Hold on, I gotta put the base in there. Open it up, and I do really love the metal zipper ends. So the metal zipper ends kind of give it a more fancy look, which is so funny because like it looks a lot fancier because it's got the metal zipper ends, but it was a lot easier to do than sewing on the little zipper ends, because the zipper ends that we sew on, these ones right here, I tell you what, I am just not a good top stitcher because I cannot make that look good, but I know other people make it look great. So it's like you actually need a stronger skill set in order to sew on those zipper ends. You need almost no skill set whatsoever in order to put the metal bag tags on. But the metal ones, in my opinion, just look like a lot classier or a lot fancier, even though they were easier. So here is our bag all finished. Oh, it's so cute. I would definitely use this for like weekender, you know, trips, things like that. Like, honestly, this would be a great snack bag too. If you're going on like a road trip or something, you can stick a bunch of snacks in it. It's easy to wash. As long as you don't use any sort of like wild vinyl or something like that, you can easily wipe this down, keep it clean, throw it in the washing machine if you need to. I love that there's no lining on it, because it's less material and it's just really quick and easy. I really like this zipper pocket on the inside that's also a slip pocket. I feel like that's extremely useful. I don't know, this is just such a well thought out and well designed bag. I love it. I like too, the pattern suggests using this as like your souvenir bag when you go on vacation. So let's say you're just going on a trip with your family, you're not planning on bringing a lot back, but then you guys, you know, you do some shopping, you have souvenirs, and you need more space in your bags than you have. This is something that doesn't take up a lot of space when you pack it, but it can hold a lot of stuff. So again, you can bring souvenirs back in this bag and it looks adorable. That's so smart. I love that. I love these ideas. So I hope you love making the champion bag with me today. Like I said, if you make it and you post it on social media, please make sure you tag me. I want to see your version. I think that there's so many fun things you can do with this. There's so much fun you can have with the vinyl combination and the material combination. Let me know what you're using too. Are you using a nylon type material, or are you using a water resistant canvas? I haven't done the water resistant canvas yet, but I do want to give that one a try. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye guys.